connects their desire for taking a great vacation with trying to save the planet. Remember, these were the folks, and and Tony Wheeler, this is, Tony traveled in the early 70s, but again, it's coming out of that same demographic. These are the folks who, hey, we're traveling on the Marrakesh Express, we're overlanding it to Afghanistan, we're on our way to India. They remember the impact those experiences had on their lives. They want to recapture that. And they're coming back around later in life, of course, also with a bit more comfort than they had back then. All the regions of the world that had experienced the strongest tourism growth in recent years have one thing in common: abundant nature and rich cultural heritage. In 2007, tourism to Africa outpaced all other regions of the world nearly 2 to 1, 8.1%, as opposed to 4.5% globally. We now have more places to go, more ways to get there than at any other time in our collective history. And how you experience a destination, and we've been talking about this, is now just as important as what you see there, if not even more important. More travelers, I call this the new green standard. And sustainable tourism is really at the heart of what that standard is about. More travelers want to engage in the world, help protect the environment, support cultural heritage. They don't just want to look at it. But they do, by the way, more and more want a really nice bottle of wine and a really nice comfortable bed at the end of the day. They are willing to, they will get mucked up during the day. They will, they'll go through almost anything during the day. But give them a nice bottle of Zinfandel at night and a nice bed, and that is where this market is going. And Bruce Puntip was saying, interestingly, in the breakout session, we started with a demographic of 25 to 35, and it was young, and, pack them in the buses. But now more people, his demographic has shifted, and more people are looking for the ability to have the kind of experiences GAP's providing them, but doing it with some comfortable accommodations. And hence, he's been reorganizing some of his company around that. And this is, of course, that same market that made Toyota number one. It's no longer a small section of the economy representing stereotypes of tree huggers wearing Birkenstock sandals, but rather this growing population of green consumers has become a significant, very significant section of the market. You've probably, in fact, they've now described it, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with the creative class economy, the term that is being used to talk about this particular group. I'd like to think that Sam Walton of Walmart woke up one morning and said, you know what? I've got to save the earth. I've got to turn my Walmart businesses around and really invest in the planet. Maybe he did. I don't know him personally. I haven't asked him. But I can bet you that he woke up one morning and he said, we cannot turn our backs on this market, which is why Walmart has now announced that they will become, within the next 5 years, the largest seller of organic products in the United States. And if any of you are still thinking in your mind about the old Walmart, Walmart today is benchmarking some of the most innovative green practices there are in any business. What a revolution. Although I think it's driven by a common business sense that we have to capture this economic clout. Now, further to that, it's also interesting to me that Disneyland in Orlando has announced that it's in its 4th straight year of decline in the tourism market. Clearly, as I believe, as the market moves away from those traditional sectors. Not all of them are going, but a lot of people are moving away. Now, and of course, we don't have to get into Disney's impact in Orlando, which from an environmental perspective is nothing short of a nightmare. But it's also interesting for me to note that Disney has created a travel division 4 years ago that's now going after this same sector of the market. How many of you are familiar with Adventures by Disney, the new adventure travel operator? Disney has moved from take the safari ride to take the safari with us. And they're taking people now out to Africa, to Thailand, and all around the world, basically trying to do what a lot of the tour operators are doing out there in the adventure and active travel market. Those wildlife, et cetera, and cultural counters. And yet, there's another example. This one I just have to tell you because I was in Las Vegas last month to give a talk at Virtuoso's annual conference. And I was intrigued that Las Vegas is now redefining itself as well. It's worth pointing out that, quote, unquote, in Vegas's marketing literature, with more outdoor activities within a 200-mile radius than any major city in the U.S., Las Vegas has emerged as the new adventure and nature travel capital of North America. Yes, it's true. Okay, so Las Vegas now, just 2 weeks ago, was profiled in USA Today for becoming one of the U.S.'s new eco-destinations. I mean, you know, the world has really gone mad when we start thinking of some of this stuff, including the Strip, which is developing new projects and renovations at existing hotels that are employing alternative energy, solar panels, green technology, instituting recycling, and so on. So clearly we know that something huge is taking place when Vegas announces it's going green, and nearly every magazine from Vanity Fair to Travel and Leisure publishes an issue on sustainable living and travel. So how did we all end up here today? This really began with the principles that were first associated with ecotourism. Its bedrock principles: responsible travel to natural areas that protects nature and sustains the well-being of local people. From that, there are many different elements, but you will find any definition of ecotourism anywhere on the planet will have those two core principles embedded in it. Now, we heard a little bit about ecotourism, sustainable tourism, whereas ecotourism is related more specifically to the nature and adventure travel arena. The idea of sustainable tourism was to take these same principles and practices of environmental protection, local, social, and cultural economic benefits, and bring them into the mainstream tourism industry, from city hotels to golf resorts to cruise lines, and it may even run in that particular order. In other words, a couple of things happened. In 2002, most of my own work at that point for the prior 15 years had been driving the ecotourism industry and working hard to move the ecotourism movement as far as it could possibly go. But when we had the World Ecotourism Summit in Quebec, this thought occurred to me, and I thought to myself, you know, 20 years from now, what if we look back on ecotourism and we say, you know what, this was an incredible success, and we managed to change 10 or maybe at best 15% of the global tourism industry? What's going to happen to the planet? We have got to ratchet this up into the mainstream businesses, and that process of taking the principles associated with ecotourism. Why stop at a lodge out in the countryside or in a jungle? Why shouldn't city-based hotels practice this? Why shouldn't all-inclusive resorts get on board with this? Why shouldn't the entire industry from top to bottom embrace these principles? And that gave birth to sustainable tourism, which refers to these principles right across the broad spectrum of the entire industry. Now, one key point here that I want to mention, yes, benefits to local people, culture, natural heritage, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, all of that tied to being and providing a profitable business model. And that last point is key to any of our discussions of sustainable tourism as a solution going forward. I cannot tell you how many well-meaning sustainable tourism projects I've seen around the world fall apart because they weren't short on the environmental, the social. They got that right, but they were not based on sound business models. And the only way we are going to move sustainable tourism forward as a real solution that delivers tangible returns, which it is doing, is if we get the business model right. It is absolutely essential to do that. I don't have a lot of time, so I'm kind of skipping over a couple of things here because I do want to just kind of hit, I guess, some of the key points. Now, at the same time, we're seeing this sustainable tourism efforts, the type of things we've been talking about here and will continue to talk about in terms of best practices and methodologies and putting it to work, moving up into this higher sector of the industry. I mentioned 2002 to you, and in 2004, the World Travel and Tourism Council, which is the world's 100 top tourism and travel businesses. This is the G8 summit of travel and tourism. These folks get together once a year at the Global Travel and Tourism Summit, and they pretty much call the shots that charts this entire industry. They're the heavy guns in it. You know, the Hiltons and the British Airways and the American Airlines and American Express and the rest of them. Now,